Almost every game has an antagonistic villain. Certainly there are exceptions like The Sims, Stardew Valley, or even Ultima 4, but in general, a good game has a bad guy. In a very good game, that big bad is usually quite memorable. They are the linchpin that holds the entire story together, gives impetus to the gameplay, and provides the reward and sense of accomplishment to the player at the end. However, in a lot of cases, the boss is not as tied to the gameplay as we might hope. Take a game like Just Cause 4, a perfectly enjoyable open-world game based around conquering strongholds currently held by your enemy. That enemy, of course, exists to exist. He literally shows up in the game 3 times and seems to engage in remarkably few nefarious activities, outside of killing you while you're attacking his bases. A major enemy whose major crime appears to be self-defense. This isn't a condemnation of the game, of course, but the supervillain of the game is sort of underwhelming. Even world-class games like Half-Life have underwhelming bosses. The Nihilanth, or the Big Baby, is the last of his kind, being hunted by the Combine, and you're there to kill him for trying to escape his tormentors. While that's a horrible story, very emotional, it's also exclusively told to you in Half-Life 2. The fact is that while the Big Baby is memorable to a lot of Half-Life players, it's mostly because it's a giant floating baby with a name that essentially means the embodiment of meaninglessness. See, even the greatest titles of all time tend to fail to have a particularly compelling bad guy. The reason you're fighting them? Because you have to fight them. They are told to you to be bad and evil, and therefore you must kill them. There's rarely any examples of actual malice outside of the fact that they're at the top of this organization which you are single-handedly taking down. In almost every single game, the big bad could be accused of nothing more than self-defense. And worse still, game developers have a habit of failing to show the player that the big bad is actually bad. What was the last game you played where the bad guy actively hurt the world, was shown to be engaging in the atrocities they were accused of, instead of merely being told that they were bad and therefore needed to become dead? Some games chose to shortcut this need for motivation by making the big bad a kidnapper like Bowser. It's easy to see the evil he has done and feel a need to rectify it. Additionally, Bowser is omnipresent. He shows up throughout the games repeatedly to mock and humiliate, to be the antagonist, and antagonize. These aren't things that are required for a good game, but they do improve it in some very important ways, creating stories that we, as the player, remember forever. And there's a reason why games with great bad guys are games we remember and cherish for our lifetimes. So it is confusing to me that the best representation of bad guy in any game ever is also considered to be one of the worst games. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link is a game that is pretty consistently called the black sheep of the Zelda franchise. It was created and released about a year after the original Zelda and represents a lot of interesting choices. It is a side-scrolling game, has RPG elements like experience and leveling up. NPCs have simple routines they follow, and they give out quest information. It has an overworld and random encounters, and it's one of the hardest games ever made, even assuming you don't accidentally name your save game Zelda. It also holds a unique position in that Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario, Donkey Kong, and Zelda, well, he calls Zelda 2 the only bad game he's ever made, and many others completely forget that this title ever existed. The Zelda franchise has a confusing timeline, but one thing is clear, and that's the fact that the storyline from Zelda 2 is never continued. It's erased, forgotten, and at best continues in Breath of the Wild many years later. However, Zelda 2 has the best bad guy of any game ever made. It's probably not surprising that Ganon is considered one of the greatest villains in gaming history. His representation in Breath of the Wild and Ocarina of Time is that of a conquering warlord, destroying and laying waste to the population. In fact, it's quite possible that you thought of this game when I asked earlier, what was the last game you played where the bad guy actively hurt the world? Well, Ganon absolutely does impact the world. He is a bad guy who does bad things. In Zelda 2, he is dead. Completely dead. But he coats the world, and when you fail at your mission, you know that Ganon is responsible. His silhouette, arguably one of the scariest and most imposing images in any early video game, mockingly laughs at you every time you died, coupled with a message that thanks to your failure, he has returned to the world. For those of you who may not have played Zelda 2, the story is very simple. At some point in the past, the original Zelda was cursed and put into a magical sleep because she was the only one who knew where the pieces of the Triforce were. After defeating Ganon in the first game, Link has proven himself courageous enough to be worthy of the Triforce, which would coincidentally also awaken Zelda, so he goes off to find it. That is the driving force of the game. You might be asking, well, what about Ganon? Ganon was turned to ashes by Link in the first game, but as with real leaders, just because he is dead does not mean his army dissolves. They may be leaderless, but they are still in the world, and they want to revive Ganon. They want to bring him back to life. The way this can be done? With the blood of the enemy who slayed him, Link. The enemies you are fighting and slaying throughout, they are the army of Ganon, fighting with a singular goal of wringing the blood from a 16-year-old boy onto the ashes of their vanquished master in a dark ritual to bring him back from the dead. Easily one of the darkest stories in the Nintendoverse. And it's this reason why Ganon is such an incredible villain in this game. He isn't even there, but his influence continues throughout. The only time you ever see him is when you fail to win, but the reason you failed is because of him. Beyond just the story beats of Ganon's influence, the gameplay of Zelda 2 also makes Ganon a bigger bad guy. Almost every single time you die in this very difficult game, it's because the forces of Ganon took you out in a bid to bring their master back to life. They stand against you not to stop you from finding the Triforce. They don't in any way aim to hinder your main mission. They just want to kill Link. Not even as revenge, but because only his blood can revive Ganon. Additionally, this NES game is the only Zelda where Link gains experience and grows stronger, not just new abilities, but actually stronger. He learns magical spells and improves his health, attack, and magical ability throughout the game. The Link that you are at the end of the game is not the Link you are at the beginning. He has grown and changed and improved. This is something you don't really see in Zelda games. Yes, you learn new abilities and you gain some more stamina, but in this game, the fight against Ganon changes Link. He doesn't just add a new toy to his utility belt, he becomes a different person. In the end, you never fight Ganon himself. In fact, the two big boss fights are against the Guardian of the Triforce and Link's shadow, Dark Link. These fights are hard enough, they represent bosses in the game, but they are not what you fight against throughout. No, you fight Ganon's revival. Link fights Ganon non-stop in this game without Ganon ever showing up unless he fails. It is a masterful approach to an antagonist and something we don't see often. A bad guy who is so ingrained in the story and the fabric of the world that even without being alive and even without being the actual main enemy of the plot, he is still the enemy of our hero. Think about a boss, an enemy in a game that you've played who is able to be this important to the fabric of the story. I'd love to know what game and how that enemy, that big bad, was able to influence the story. Tell me in a comment below. I read them all. If you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it. It's the only way we grow. You can watch another one in the corner right now, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.